Jake is sitting in a coffee shop on a Wednesday morning. He is wearing a plain black cap, a flannel shirt, dark jeans, boots that have seen better days. He has a regular drip coffee, not the fancy one, and he is reading a book that has no impressive title on the cover. Nobody in this coffee shop is looking at him. Nobody's wondering who he is. Nobody's calculating what he might be worth, and Jake is worth $650 million. This is not a story about how Jake built his wealth. That story exists, and it is remarkable. This is a different story. This is about why Jake chooses to live this way. Why a person who could have anything chooses to look like he has nothing. Why someone worth $650 million drives a 10-year-old Honda and fixes his own sinks and orders the regular coffee. Not because he cannot afford better, but because he has thought very carefully about what better actually means and arrived at a conclusion that most people never reach, because most people never have to. Reason 1. You cannot unknow what you know about people. Jake learned this early, before the money was significant. When the money was just starting to be noticeable, he had a friend, a close friend, someone he had known since his 20s, who asked Jake for an investment in his business. Not unusual, not unreasonable, but something shifted in the friendship after Jake said no, and something different shifted when Jake said yes to another friend's request the following year. And Jake realized something that cannot be unfelt once you feel it, that the moment people know what you're worth, every interaction has a new layer underneath it, a layer of calculation, of positioning, of wondering. And that layer never goes away. You cannot have an innocent conversation with someone who knows your net worth, because they know your net worth, and that knowledge sits in every room you share with them. Jake went invisible, not to hide from the world, but to protect his ability to see it clearly. Reason 2, invisible wealth creates invisible freedom. When people know you are wealthy, they begin to attach obligations to that wealth. Your family has expectations. Your friends have assumptions. Your community has requests. Your neighbors have opinions. The local charity assumes you will give. The business contact assumes you will invest. The distant relative assumes you will help. And none of these expectations are malicious, but together they form a kind of invisible cage, built not from bars, but from what people believe you owe them. Jake drives the Honda, not because he is cheap, but because the Honda creates no obligations. Nobody looks at Jake's Honda and thinks he owes them something. The Honda is freedom, in the form of a vehicle that cost $11,000. Reason 3, the psychology of enough. Here is something that Jake discovered that genuinely surprised him. The happiest period of his financial life was not when he had the most money. It was when he first had enough. Enough to never worry about rent. Enough to never stress about medical bills. Enough to help his parents. Enough to sleep without financial anxiety. That feeling of enough was the purest financial satisfaction he has ever experienced, and everything above enough did not multiply that feeling. It complicated it, because above enough, money stops solving problems and starts creating them. Different problems, better problems in many ways, but problems nonetheless. The stealth wealth lifestyle, the Honda, the flannel, the regular coffee, is Jake's way of living as close as possible to the feeling of enough, while sitting on top of something much larger. Reason 4, the target problem. Jake has a friend, another person of significant wealth, who made the mistake of being visible about it. Not ostentatiously, just visibly. Nice car, nice house, visible watch. And that visibility attracted things that Jake's invisibility has protected him from. A lawsuit from a former business partner who saw the visible wealth and calculated that there was something worth fighting for. A family member who became bitter about the distribution of a shared inheritance because the visible wealth made the perceived unfairness more glaring. A security concern that required hiring protection that changed how his children experienced their childhood. Jake is not paranoid, he is not fearful, he is practical. You cannot be targeted if nobody knows you are a target. The Honda is not humility. The Honda is armor. Reason 5, the authenticity equation. Jake has a circle of people who do not know his net worth, not because he has hidden it deceptively, but because it has never come up. And in that circle, he experiences something that becomes increasingly rare as wealth accumulates. Genuine human interaction. People who disagree with him, not because they are afraid of offending a wealthy person, but because they genuinely disagree. People who ask him for advice on things that have nothing to do with money. People who cancel plans without elaborate apologies. People who tell him when he is wrong, and the texture of those relationships, ordinary, sometimes frustrating, occasionally boring, is the most valuable thing that $650 million has not been able to replicate in any other part of his life. Reason 6, the final reason, the one Jake does not say often, because it sounds strange coming from someone worth $650 million. Jake stays invisible because visibility feels like loss. Not the loss of privacy specifically, but the loss of the version of himself that existed before the wealth was significant. The version who sat in coffee shops unremarkably, who worried about normal things, who was surprised by good days and disappointed by bad ones, who was a person first and a net worth second. Visible wealth makes you a net worth first, and a person when people remember to look past the number. Jake drives a 10-year-old Honda and reads the book with no impressive title, and orders the regular coffee, not because he cannot imagine a different life, but because this life, invisible, ordinary, unremarkable to everyone who walks past, is the one that lets him be fully himself, and there is no amount of money that can buy that. Once you have given it away, here is the truth about self-wealth. It is not modesty. It is not frugality. It is not performance. It is a deliberate psychological decision made by people who have thought carefully about what wealth is actually for, and concluded that the answer has almost nothing to do with what other people can see. You have been decoded. If this video made you think about wealth differently, not as something to display, but as something to protect, subscribe to Money Decoder 3004. Every single week, we decode the psychology and strategy of wealth that most Americans never get to understand. Simply, honestly, and clearly, drop a comment below. Would you choose stealth wealth or visible wealth if you had $650 million? Tell me why. I read every single comment, and I will see you in the next decode.